Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we are live. We're about to get started with the Dispatchers Roundtable. This is going to be round 26, but first, as always, a word from our sponsors.
At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned. And just like that, we're back. I don't have an actual formal intro for the Dispatchers Roundtable yet. I'm still putting that one together. One day I'll have that put in there with the actual intro music and all that other stuff. And but this works. This is how we're doing this. And we're jumping right in. This is going to be interesting because there's a few of us here that have one screen. So we're working off of this, and it's going to be weird for me to do this here. But either way, I am super excited to be here with all of you. Again, this is the Dispatchers Roundtable. This is going to be round 26. We are back. This episode is sponsored by InDigital Rapid Deploy as well as Carbine. A shout out to patrons. As always, thank you. If you have any questions at all for those who are on the panel, just throw them in the comments. Throw any questions or anything in there. I have an excellent group with me here today. It's just part of just a great group of folks who worked on the reclassification toolkit, and that is what we're going to be talking about here today. So once again, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, just throw that in the comments. We'll get to them as we're going through. We've got a lot to cover, so we're about to get started. We usually have some big old intros and everything, but we're just going to be jumping in. So one at a time here. I got my first guest, and her name is Sarah Weston.
Hello.
Welcome. You were just on another one here a little bit ago, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep. And I'm talking really well today, which is great.
Oh, well, awesome. Then let's do this. Let's keep the momentum going then. Yeah. Another person who's been, I believe, talking all day. She's going to be traveling and doing all kinds of stuff. Is Halcyon Frank with the Dispatch Lab?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm here.
I'm here. Good.
I'm here.
She is here.
Yes.
We're so glad.
Yes. So my next guest here is Nikki, and she is a former dispatcher, but now works with MCP.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh, this is going to be good. And then last but not least, the always awesome Mr. Ty Wooten. I was going to give a little middle name in there as well, make one up, but I decided not to. Well, I won't do it.
I had the urge to do a drum roll.
I am effing Wooten. I did it.
Yeah.
AAD.
Do you have a middle name, Ty? We all want to know.
David.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's very, very serene.
Can I call you Ty Damon from now on?
Yeah.
I dig it. So
Thanks for having me, Roberto.
Yes. Oh, that's right, Roberto. What did I call you? I forget what I called you that one time.
I don't
Oh, you
remember.
Jeff? I think I called you Jeff. That's
Yeah,
all
that
it
was
was. Yeah. So quick side story. This was a few years ago when I was still working within digital. I was in Kentucky for this directors summit that they were doing. And Ty was talking about text 911 and other stuff that Indiana's doing. And he says, yeah, Roberto's sitting back there. He works within digital. He can probably tell you guys. And the whole room erupts into laughter. Everyone is laughing. And I was like, yeah, sure, Jeff. I'll go ahead and tell them or something like that. And it was hilarious. So now I'm Roberto and he's Jeff. Forever.
That's so funny because that's people call my mom Roberta all the time. Her
Oh,
name's Roberta.
You just said that right there. That's what. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Oh man, that is the best. So we've got people who are checking in here already. This is excellent. We actually have somebody out of Indiana here. What's up, Zach? What is going on? And again, we are here to talk about the reclassification toolkit. This has been a hot topic for years now, but especially now even more so with a lot of different things that have been coming up, but especially this year, this reclassification toolkit. And I want to start out with Nikki here, kind of talking about the history of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which for all of those who are watching, we're going to be referring to them as just straight up BLS. And you come from dispatch. I'm not talking about BLS, EMS style, basic life support. No, this is the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, but the history of the ruling for telecommunicators in 2018.
Yeah, so as most people know, in 2018, there was a massive push nationwide to reclassify telecommunicators, and unfortunately, it did not go through. We do know that the job title was changed. We were changed from dispatchers to public safety telecommunicators, but we weren't able to shift the needle in the reclassification, unfortunately. Looking back at this, when we started questioning kind of why, what were we missing? What was the piece that was missing to drive this forward and push this forward is a lot of, there was a lack of objective measurable evidence. And we found out that from BLS, right, they are statisticians, they like data, that's how they make their decisions. And the emotional pleas kind of didn't do what they were supposed to do because they just didn't have that data behind it. So the data didn't support the change. Again, it was more of that emotional plea. And unfortunately, ultimately, the 911 position still remains classified as that clerical administrative position.
Yeah, there was. I remember when that ended up getting shot down. I was on a work trip, and I saw it, and I think I wrote a post actually that had a nod towards the Beatles, "Day in the Life." And I heard the news today. Oh boy! And I added on there something about how the OMB ended up shooting down what we were trying to do. I don't remember exactly how I put it, but it was funny, and I wanted to put it out there for that reason, but also to make people start thinking about this and digging into why exactly it was that it was shot down. And like you were saying, there's a lot of different things with protocols and that hard data that they were looking for that just wasn't there at the time. So what were some of the things that, and for all of you, really digging into this and researching, what did we learn from this loss? Like what came out of this? How did we start building more towards this to push forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we found from doing our research, working on this reclassification effort with the National 911 program, is that the things that they were looking at were, I don't think, things we were thinking of in the telecommunicator industry, myself included, right? We know today that the BLS went out and looked at over 1,000 job descriptions. They looked at the job titles, they looked at hiring and recruiting, education and training, and the focus on certification, right? We know not all states have minimum training standards, let alone minimum certification standards. kind of the tools and technology that are out there that a telecommunicator uses, as well as like what professions and trade associations are out there. So when we started diving into this specifically, and specifically around the job description, we also went out and researched job descriptions too. And we found that like most of the job descriptions were older than the people in the positions. And about 50%, yeah, I know. It was just, yeah, that one hit me like, whoa, time out here, right? And then we found about 50% of the job descriptions still had things such as clerical duties or administrative duties written in these job descriptions. So you can see why the BLS saw those kind of key phrases and, honed in on them. So it was definitely eye-opening for myself to, again, take a data-driven approach as opposed to an emotional approach to this project.
So I guess right off the bat, though, and I should have asked this before
Yeah.
the learning about this from the loss. What were your thoughts, though? And this is for any of you on the panel. What were your thoughts initially back in 2018 when they're like, "Nah, son, we're not doing this"? What were your thoughts? We lost, so it ended up losing. So what was that initial feeling?
I think for me it was it was a bit of a gut punch, and I think from my standpoint also it was a bit of a gut punch because it felt like to me it was like a lost opportunity. Like there were a few people doing things, but they weren't really. There was no concerted effort and there was no combined effort where everybody was looking at it from a same vantage point. And I think that was the part that was the difficult part for me, because I was thinking what a huge opportunity that was lost. And this not only to get the reclassification, but in general raise the level of understanding about what we do in this industry and the professionals that are doing it every single day and are making such an impact on the communities that they serve. And so I think that's the big thing. And it was near the end, after they had done the preliminary ruling, that Nina reached out and tried to get them to, they actually, Brian Fonts and Trey Fogarty, the director of government affairs at the time, ended up taking some of those folks to 911 centers in the DC area. And I think it was a little bit eye-opening at that point for them. But I also think that at that point, the train had left the station. And so it was an opportunity now. Now we understand what we need to do. Now what do we got to do to make that happen and move things forward in a different way?
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sarah? What were your initial thoughts?
I think my initial thought was WTF. Like I couldn't fathom. I just didn't understand, until we dug into it and figured out what the BLS was basing this decision on. I was just like, what is wrong? Like what happened? Something went wrong in this process, because how could this be? And knowing that it was another 10 years before, we could even try to change this again. Like at the time, I wasn't as aware of like federal legislation and state efforts. So I just kind of felt deflated and like, what is like, just kind of like the, what is happening feeling.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I agree with Ty, it was definitely a gut punch. Just, oh man, like, okay, but how do we regroup? How do we keep going? And before we move on to the next part, I want to hear from Halcyon as well. What was your initial thought when it turned out that, ended up losing it?
I think still kind of being early on in my career, in the sense of like, I know the bigger world of dispatch per se. I don't know that I had a reaction, just because I didn't even know what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of, especially newer dispatchers, who don't even know what that means. So now as the conversations go and I'm involved in them more, like with the toolkit, it's really eye-opening, and it just highlights like how significant it was, even though at the time, like I didn't even realize how significant it was.
Excellent. So, all this time has passed, a few years have passed, and it's again, like I said in the beginning, it's still a hot topic, and it has been, and it will be until, this ends up getting going through. We end up getting this reclassification. So we get to this toolkit and everything. And I want to know, and for all those who are watching and listening as well, is why this toolkit exists. So this is going to go to both Nikki and Ty. Is this supposed to, prepare us for anything, for the next BLS evaluation in 2028, just by looking back at the feedback from 2018, so that we can make some appropriate changes, or why does this exist exactly?
So, Ty, I'll jump in if you're okay. Yeah. I see him on mute still there. So I think the toolkit, the initial, when we started with the toolkit, we actually just started with the first piece, which was actually the job description piece. Like you heard me say, that we were blown away by how outdated some of these things were. So that's where we started first. And then we realized that there's kind of a couple things that we needed to do. A, we needed to address the BLS and get the data they needed, right? So that's where the other three pieces of the toolkit were. But B, it also 10 years is a long time to wait, right, for something to happen at the federal level. So what power or what tools could we give localities today to start moving their needle in their own agency? And I was blessed that I was able to push the envelope in the county or as a PSAP director, and we were recognized as first responders. State didn't recognize us as first responders. The federal government doesn't, but my county administrator did. So we wanted to be able to give those tools and those kind of things, get the power back to tell, the dispatch agencies to be able to push and drive that forward, and not wait on federal reclassification. And then the last piece is just about elevating the profession. That if you follow all these pieces of the toolkit and that you're automatically going to make your 911 center better, right? If you have certificates, training, a good job description, sophisticated tools and technology written into your SOPs, even just the tools and technology used today, right? It doesn't have to be the shiniest Cadillac, but just having all that put together, right, is really just going to elevate the profession of 911 to begin with, regardless of what happens with reclassification.
Excellent. And what about you, Ty?
I agree. I think, from as we began to put this together, it began to build and understand that first and foremost, one thing we recognize right off the bat is if we have this problem with job descriptions, that's one thing that we can help people do that can make a huge impact in that data-driven decision, as Nikki said earlier, when we get to that point of reclassification by BLS in the future. And that's what that's, for me, that's like one of the driving things. I think the efforts that are happening on a state and local and even regional levels to help recognize and understand reclassification are also fantastic. But I think ultimately, all of those things on state, local, county government levels, they all still kind of rely on that federal classification. So, ultimately we can do all of that work and it doesn't go unnoticed, because I think the more and more that people see that we're reclassified or classified as first responders already in other aspects, that helps to make the argument that dispatchers are and should be reclassified as first responders. So it's all of these pieces together, and to me it's just like what we do every single day in the 911 center. We can't just rely on one aspect or another, right? It can't just be administration and the policies that are driven, and it can't be just the trainers or relying on some training material. It's the supervisors, it's everything and everyone working together to create this momentum that gets us over the edge and makes that decision a little bit easier for those in BLS. Because I think from my standpoint, yes, 10 years is a long time, but as Nikki has alluded to, in some of these job descriptions that are, as old as I am, and I'm oldest person in this room by far. um, it's time to get these things up to date. And we have seen examples of job descriptions that are woefully out of date, talking about stuff that they don't even do anymore, and no one's updated it. And that's a problem. And it adds to this overwhelming idea of what we chatted about a little bit earlier, the fact that this also just helps raise the bar for our industry. And when you have updated and correct job descriptions, it can make a difference in recruiting people. There's so many agencies across the country today are fighting this problem with, short staff. And part of that might be the fact that they haven't touched a job description in so many years, and they're not actually recruiting people, or people look at a job and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's sucky, right? But if they talk about what we really do, it would be really cool, and they might be interested in doing it.
Right.
So I think that's it serves so many facets, and it's all how it all puts together and creates that big picture and puzzle. It's all of those pieces together, whether it's individual reclassification or job descriptions or whatever it may be. So,
I was going to ask if there was any aha moments during this time when this was getting built, but I feel like that one right there is one of them. Is those job descriptions? That's one that I really didn't think about as well. Thinking back to when I applied in dispatch in the county that I grew up in, I think it was pretty damn old. So that is definitely one of those. But what were some of the other aha moments, I guess, that you had? And this for anyone right now in this panel before we get to the next part, which I'll go to Sarah for that part. But for this one, what were some other aha moments when this was being built?
First, I if I can, I would just like to touch on the old comment that Tyler. I thought I was really young. And I taught a class today. This is not like, no disrespect, but I told a story about a pursuit that started from a gas drive-off, and I had a gal who was like, "What's a gas drive-off?" Because no one, you able to pay and then pump, or used to be able to pump then pay. Now that just doesn't exist anymore. So I felt much older. Anywho.
Uh-huh.
I apologize to anybody else whose day I ruined with that.
You're so elderly.
I think one for me, it kind of goes back to Ty of just as we're working through it, thinking about all the ways that this can be applied. One thing I want to make sure people understand, especially like for me, coming from a rural center in a state that sometimes seems a little behind, if you will, is these are not like high level government documents that are just like, make a job description, do your policies and procedures. Each piece of this offers tactical, tangible advice about, okay, you need to do your policies and procedures. Here's examples. So kind of was an aha, but kind of also something I just want to make sure that people understand is it is not just, you're going to get it there and read it and be like, okay, this doesn't do anything. It really can help serve people, because I think so often we see people asking, what do you guys do this? What do you do for that? How do you write that? And these are going to help answer those questions along with all the things that other people have mentioned.
Excellent. Sarah or Nikki, were there any like aha type moments or anything like that going through this process?
For me, it was more like general. So getting the ruling from the BLS and having that WTF moment and like feeling defeated and deflated, instead of just getting mad, digging in, so the national federal leadership of 911, My phone's talking to me because I talk with my hands, so it thought I was talking to it. The federal leadership really led this effort to say, no, we're not going to stop. We're not going to be mad. We're not going to keep pushing with something that didn't work. We're going to figure out what it is that went wrong, and we're going to fix it. And back to Ty's comment about having a 10-year runway, I think the fact of the matter is we might need a 10-year runway to take 911 as a profession to where it needs to go, because it's on the people in the centers to do this work. And that's why this toolkit exists, to take what's in the minds of states and localities who have had success, keeping in mind that every state's different, but putting all of those tools and all of those lessons learned along with some of the best minds in 911 that we have, like Ty, and putting that all together in one place that you can take it. And it's not a 100-page document, and a lot of these documents are examples and templates and things you don't have to recreate the wheel. So for me, it was following that example of we're not gonna just lay down. We're gonna get up and we're gonna fight and we're gonna make this better. And whatever happens, but we're gonna elevate our profession in the process.
Excellent. Nikki, what about you?
So I think my aha moment was learning how BLS worked and understanding that. I wish I had known that back in 2016 when this first movement kind of came about, because I definitely would have approached it differently. So learning that piece was the biggest aha moment for me, and understanding that it's data driven, and then understanding the pieces of the data that they're looking for. And if I'm not mistaken, they'll start collecting data in 2024. So even though the decision's not until 2028, it's in 2024 where this research starts. So that's really 2 years that we've got ready to kind of get things in line, which seems that's not much time at all. So that seems a little overwhelming. But the other big aha piece was kind of listening to the stakeholders as we built out this toolkit, and Sarah and Halcyon have hit on it, just how important it was to have tangible, actionable items. Like, don't tell me that I need to rewrite my SOPs, but give me examples of how they should read. And like, if you go into the job description, you'll actually find a model job description in there that is there to be copied and pasted, right? We want you to use it. And same in the legislative. Each section has those tools and actual things you can use, and you're not having to reinvent the wheel by any means of the imagination.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, I think not only is the templates there, but the examples of going in and talking about the different aspects. Like a couple things stand out to me after going over and reading the job description stuff over again recently. And that is like talking about protocols that you're using, talking about the types of technology that you're using, describing that in the job description, talking about the continuing education requirements, talking about the minimum training guidelines and requirements that you have, those little things like that oftentimes, and I've been doing this for 1,000 years. And so, sometimes we forget about that stuff. We know that we're supposed to do it, but we forget. And so having that template that was the cat jumped out of the window and it scared the crap out of me.
Hope he's okay.
Oh, she's fine. Nina, my cat named Nina.
Yes.
Having all of that stuff there as this kind of reminder to not only the template being there, but these like prompts. Have you talked about this? Have you talked about that? That's the tools to me that, like, the template's fun and fine, but those kind of prompters that are added into these devices or into these toolkits, that's the cool stuff for me. I think that's one of the biggest attributes that are in there.
And if I could kind of go off of what we were talking about before I have to jump off here. One thing too, like being in the center, so being in the seat, that I want people to also realize is, I think sometimes when we get things from the state level or the federal level, it feels like they're telling us, like, do this. And in my experience, that is not at all what the purpose of the toolkit is. It is not just 911.gov being like, here's things that we, want you to do. It's a team effort. So instead of every center and every state or whoever, researching the BLS, researching what we need to do, putting these together, it's the stakeholders that have come together and done them and are like, okay, here, we've put in this work. It's a team effort. And now you as the centers are able to take that and put in the work in your end. So that way, collaboratively, we're able to come together when the BLS starts looking at it and say, this is what we've done. This is our data. It's very much not a directive, not a mandate. It is a team effort. And so we're trying to make those steps easier for the center. So that way they don't have to take that time and energy to do kind of the background work that's been done with the toolkit.
Halcyon, thank you for saying that. That is such an important point. This toolkit is housed on 911.gov, but we created it, and we meaning community. There's 911.gov, the National 911 program paid for and led the effort, but these documents were put together by folks in 911 centers, folks at NINA, folks at state levels, local levels. This is by 911 for 911, and it's not a sanction. It is, here are some lessons learned, best practices, things that have worked in the past. So yes, that's a really good point.
And with that, I'm going to jump off, but it was fun. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Good luck on your webinar. You're going to be awesome. So I one of the things that I like the most hearing from all of you is that you were also kind of giving a nod and homage to those in states who have done this at a state level. And I just want to put this on the screen here really quick, because Roxy, who is also part of your crew, everyone who helped put this together, she says, I think it's incredibly powerful to see states and counties rising up to gain first responder status. I think / hope that it is something that the federal government has a hard time ignoring. So there's a lot of folks that that were part of those efforts, I believe, that also helped you guys put all the stuff together, as you were saying too. So there's so much that has gone into this, and a lot of the state stuff happened before the toolkit came out, but you were able to get a lot of information from all those folks to put into this, so that now moving forward, people will have this to be able to do even more with it, which is amazing. So I want to get here to the next part, and because we were talking already about feedback and why the toolkit exists, but I want to go to Sarah here really quick, because this is a three-pronged approach, right, to reclassification. It's the BLS, federal, and then state.
Yeah, I think this is an important point, because it feels like there's three efforts happening between getting reclassified through the OMB BLS process, federal legislation through the 911 Saves Act, and also what states and localities are doing to become reclassified to first responders. I like to think that these all help each other, that all of these efforts are interrelated somehow, and that in doing the work at the state level, at the 911 center level, you're pushing forward the data that's going to go into the BLS. And then also, I feel like the more states that have success in reclassifying shows the folks at the federal level that this is something that needs to be done, and that's happening. The more states that do it, the more they can look out and say, oh, well, 48 states have done this, so we must need to do it. So there's been some debate back and forth whether, that's helping or hurting the federal effort. But in my mind, this is all helping 911. This is helping elevate the profession, helping to make things better for those in the seats and for those calling 911. So for me, this has been kind of more of a grassroots approach. And as you mentioned, we talked a lot to states that have had success: Kansas, Texas, California, and they all have had input into this. So I think that's important to remember when we're thinking about reclassification as a whole, is it's not one approach that's going to get it. It's us working together, putting a plan in place and moving forward.
Now, out of that approach, as you mentioned, you feel like this helps all three of those. And what we're seeing here on the screen is this toolkit overview. If you can kind of go through these parts, because we're gonna touch on these parts, but what I want everyone to know who's watching this right now, and those who end up listening to it, who are patrons who get that audio version of this round of the DRT, is that there are some crowdcast sessions that we're going to be talking about here towards the end, putting some links up and everything, where this group is going to be going in depth with this with the reclassification toolkit to talk more about it and how all of you can use it. This here for the roundtable is just an overview, high level, talking about what all this is about and everything, but they're going to be digging deep into it, and it's something you're not going to want to miss. So please make sure to tune in for that as well. And also, if there are any questions or anything, please throw them into the comments here. But I feel like we're kind of covering all of this pretty well as it is. So go ahead, Sarah, with this overview.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this to Nikki, who oversaw, all four parts of this, and then we'll dive a little bit into each one, like you said, just an overview, and then later on in the month of February, we'll go into each one in depth. But the one point I want to make is, this is for you, and we're trying to get the word out to the folks in the centers to download this document and to use it. So that's our main goal. But go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, so each of the parts of the toolkit kind of go back to that BLS objective data, right? The tools, the technology, the job description, the job title. And the training, the certifications, the professional, professional organizations. So each piece of this goes back to that objective data, and has, again, as you already heard us talk about, has those tangible steps and actions that you can take to kind of address those. But each document gives you a little bit of background and history of how we got to where we got to. So you can read all four together. They fit really nicely. But if you know that your training program's kind of up to date and you don't want to read that chapter, that's absolutely fine. Each of these documents kind of stands as a standalone document from each other. I would highly recommend you read each four, but that's me, right? I'm emotionally attached and invested into this, just a tad. Yeah. But definitely, right, if you wanted to, browse through one, you'd be absolutely fine. But you'll find that each one is kind of broken down into a history section, a little bit of background. There's explanation behind things. We get into best practices and standards that are out there. So again, all that research that seems overwhelming, like, what training standards do I use? Well, we've done that work for you, and you can find that in the training program toolkit. The tools, the technology, again, what kind of tools and technology should I be thinking about? Again, you'll find a graphic in there that, oh gosh, the graphic takes up a whole page of all the tools and technology that we could think of that's in a 911 center today.
I love that graphic.
I do too.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's so cool.
I've never seen it all down on, like, visually on paper like that. All of the technology you use. I know. That should just be a one-page paper just to hand to somebody. Like, this is all the stuff we do.
Yes,
just make posters.
Honestly, that's one of those things where you almost could say, you have questions about what we do and what we should be classified. Yeah. Here, look at this one piece of paper, and that in itself could be a declaration for why, right?
Yeah.
So I totally agree.
Yes, we'll have that graphic and then a picture of the 6 screens. Like, this is where it all lives.
Oh man. Well, so I want to drop this off here really quick because I want to go into the part 1 part of this, because there's a picture that I want to share here really quick, and I think this is the one. Yes. Okay. We can dig into that part. I've got images for each part here that I want to show, and I think this was Nikki. This was your part as well.
Yeah.
This part, and then the second part, the second image. But I just kind of want you to go over a little bit of this, what people are looking at.
Yeah, so this is what you look. I don't want to go too far into deep
Sure, right.
today. Yeah, but what you're seeing here is kind of the major steps that you could take. And again, you see everything that we've given you is an actionable item. So right, the biggest thing is you need to understand your job requirements. And we already hit on that today, that we were finding job descriptions. We've all said it, all of us on this panel have all seen these job descriptions that just don't match what we do. And they're just so outdated. So that's probably where you need to start with when you're looking at your job description, right? Really identifying those key components. What are the tools and technology that you use in your 911 center, right? Are you putting that into the job description? Really engaging your hiring authority. You may not have control on how often you can update your job descriptions, and that we've seen that with some 911 centers that that's so dependent on the HR department. But that's having those conversations with them, bringing them to the table, so you understand how your hiring works, how your recruitment works, all those pieces. Again, right? It goes just in this. It's not just I'd write a job description, I'd post it on social media. There's so much more to it behind the scenes. And then working with trusted resources. So definitely taking a look at that model job description. If you know that there's an agency that you really like ask, right, read theirs. What does theirs look like, right? Is it exciting? Is it flashy? Is it shiny? And you're going to be drawn to it, right? As opposed to how does your job description look like? I think everybody will admit in 911 that we're here to share resources and tap into them, find out from your neighbor what's been successful, what hasn't. So that's kind of what the job description gets into, with those kind of actionable items behind the scenes.
Excellent. Very, very well put. That is definitely one of the things that I know. I've talked to a lot of people now. I've been out of dispatch for 8 years, but I have folks that I know that are directors now, who I knew when they were baby dispatchers, but now have moved all the way up and everything. And we've talked about a lot of those job descriptions. They're like, man, that stuff's been there for ages, and we don't know what to do with it or where to go. I'm like, well, you need to start updating those, because that's really what people are looking at. That's one of the main things here. Now, I want to share another screen here, image here really quick. And I put a question out to everyone, because I want to see what people are thinking as well. And even in the replay, people will be able to respond to it. But I put out there for the audience, how many of you have updated or need to update your job description? That I'm sure there's probably a lot of them out there probably thinking like, I'm not sure. I have to check that out. The next one here, this part 2, is establishing and expanding a PST training program.
So that's me also on this one too. So when I was in 911, I had a background in training also too. So I was a training coordinator as part of my career, and got really involved in the national standards because of it. So the training program, again, it's really similar to the job description. You'll see all the 4 parts are very similar. So when you read each document, you're not having to change gears, having to change your brain. And again, it's those actionable items. But you can see the first thing that we're telling you with your training program is first go and review and update your job description. Because if that's not right, how can I train correctly, and vice versa, right? Because if I'm not getting, I think, Ricardo, you said it, that if I don't hire the right people because the job description is wrong, then I'm going to train them on the wrong stuff. And it's not going to match.
Yeah, no, you're right. And a lot of times people will see some of those descriptions. They'll come in and they'll sit with us for a sit along, and like, oh yeah, you guys are just kind of sitting waiting for stuff to happen. I'm like, no. That's not this is not a good depiction of 911. Like, it goes to hell. And if you want some, even saying to some of the people who would come in, like, do you like adrenaline rushes? Because sometimes taking a 911 call is like being in a fast car and pressing the gas pedal and letting go of the steering wheel, because Anything can happen. It goes crazy.
Or my first ride in a Tesla last week, and I thought I was going to die.
Because it went automatic. It was in like the auto
Yeah,
mode.
the Uber driver put it in automatic mode, and
Oh my God.
and we're driving on off ramps and stuff like that in Southern California, and I was holding on for dear life. I was like, I'm not really liking this. I I can appreciate what they're trying to do, but holy crap, they're going too fast.
That's such a great analogy for
It
911.
is actually, yeah.
Yeah. I like on this this graphic here, the very last one here. It says, and this is something that you've all been talking about as well this whole time on how you built this, but also how we're just learning from each other. Seek advice from other ECCs, and I think especially now because we're able to communicate so much better and
Right.
faster through all the technology that we have, that beforehand you couldn't really reach out. I mean, of course you could call somebody, but a lot of times people are like, oh, we'll just try to figure it out ourselves. But now you can actually go to you can go to others and just learn and learn and learn so much, especially with like with what we're doing right now, discussions like this and the webinars and such, that the workshops rather that you all are going to be doing. The next part here,
As you're flipping over, Ricardo, that reminds me of a story when I was a baby manager in a 911 center.
Yeah.
I actually fell under the fire chief, and at some point we were having a conversation. He's like, "You know what the most important piece of equipment in a firehouse is?" And I was like, "Oh, this is like a daunting question, right?" I'm thinking fire trucks, hose, people, Halligan tools. I was thinking about anything. And he's like, "No, it's a copy machine." He said, "None of this shit is new. We just have to copy what other people have already figured out, change the names to protect the innocent, make it our own, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel." And I think, as what you were just talking about, and those ideas of searching and seeking out others and advice from others is key. I think that's a testament to what the National 911 Program Office has done, and what Nikki and Sarah have been talking about, and even Halcyon, is the fact that this was a giant collaborative effort. And so that's what we were doing, is we were already trying to start that process of pulling that data together to make it just that much more simple and easier for you when you go out and start to implement this in your own centers.
That's good, because I think a lot of this, and I think some of the reasons too that people don't always ask a lot of questions, because they don't know what to ask or where to go. And the fact that all of this is put together and that all of you are going to be going way more in depth with it, they'll be able to have that information and have what they need to ask further questions and move forward in this entire process, especially for everything that they're doing. But now with this third part here, operational integration and of technology and tools, this part I was going to go to Halcyon for, because it talks about SOPs and such as well. But I will go back to either Nikki or Ty for this part.
Well, Nikki's got her is muted, so I'll take it. I think it's very similar as the structures as the other two, and as Nikki said earlier, they're all structured exactly the same way. And really, giving you, we got to think about, when we talk about technology and things like that, there are specific things, there are standards that are out there. There are regulations. There are standards that are codified in states, right? A lot of NFPA standards are codified in state statute, and or local statute, and require you to do different things. Some of those things are an aspect and are relevant to the 911 industry. So you've got to make sure that you're thinking about those types of things. And what are we trying to do? National, NCIC requirements, that's a national standard, and it's a national technological tool that every law enforcement 911 dispatcher in the country is doing, right? Yes, there are variations on the theme based on the state, but it goes back to some sort of CJIS standard. And so those types of things are important for us to take a look at, use the subject matter experts that we have to drive and help to elevate and make sure we're not selling ourselves short in the technological aspects when we're putting these things together, talking about the job descriptions, really all of these things, except for the first three here are they still, all of them go back to that job description. And Nikki was spot on when she said it in the last section, that if you don't have good job descriptions, you can't train people to them. If you've got spectacular technology, but you don't talk about it in your job description and you're not doing it in your training, then it's just a multi-million-dollar, paperweight. So all of those things, we've got to work together and work with each other. I think the other, looking at, accreditations, whether it's the ACE accreditation from the academies or the CALIA accreditation and other things that are happening, even recognitions that centers can get. I know that NINA is coming out with a new recognition for training and commitment to training and doing all of those things. So all of those things combined add to all of this. And it just, again, goes back to what Sarah said earlier, helps to elevate the profession. If nothing else, I'm knocking on wood here, and I hope that it doesn't happen, because I hope that all of the efforts that we've done so far and what will happen over the next 3 years as we get ready for that decision in 2028 is a positive one. But even if it doesn't happen, I'm going to play real devil's, Debbie Downer at the moment and say, all of our efforts go unnoticed and they still keep us the way they are. At the end of the day, I know that we have done more to elevate the profession and understanding about what these amazing people do today than we had 10 years ago. And so, when it's all said and done, we might still not be happy with what the outcome is. But at the end result, we all have to hang our hat and know that we still did a good job.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And just bringing everyone together and working on something, it's just to be unified, right? And I like what Natalie here says in the comments here. She says, or you keep seeing the same questions over and over. I love that we have a place to go to that is public. I've always said that we have to share with each other, just like what we've all been talking about. We have to share with each other. The more we share what is relevant to our 911 industry, brings us closer to having a national standard. Long overdue in our industry. And she says, nice job. She says, we all want reclassification to be recognized as what we do. Yet many have to understand that with that title comes responsibilities. One I see is standardized training in our 911 industry.
Right. And that, and that's a good point. I mean, the reality is that was in some respects, some of the, I look back on my 400 years in this business, and
I thought it was 1,000.
Well, maybe, I don't know. It's all starting to run together. But Natalie's comment about a national training standard. Well, sure, but that it was 10, 11 years ago, and I wrote an article in the NINA magazine, said we should have a national training standard, and then Lori Flaherty and her great, you might be, Natalie, but not very much older than me.
I cannot believe you said that. I'm just like,
maybe. I said she might. I didn't say she was. I said she might be, but it couldn't be very much older. But Lori pulled together an incredible team at that point to develop the minimum training guidelines. That the recognition of the years of experience and the years of work to do all of these things. We've been working on this. I think in some ways we've been working on this and not knowing we were working on it, through all of those things. And I remember when we started that process back in the day, there were, I think, 18 states in the country that had minimum training requirements for 911 telecommunicators. We're now up to 32, and I can, report as of today that, Indiana is one step closer. We passed the Senate on Tuesday of this week. So we're, hopefully in the next month or so, it'll be 33. And, we're just working to knock it off one at a time. But all of these things combined, all of these activities, not only help the discussion about reclassification, but really in general, and raising the bar for our profession.
It's an amazing time, man. There's a lot of different things going on, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. It is so good. I love that we can have discussions like this, and just continue to push forward. The next part that I want to touch on here before we go kind of into the wrap up of this discussion about the reclassification toolkit and really pushing some of the links and such for the crowdcast sessions that are going to be coming up, going in depth into each one of these parts. This part here it goes to Sarah. So this is part 4, and this is developing a legislative strategy for reclassification.
So part 4 is a little bit different. Has a little bit of a different focus than the first 3, which are focused on BLS data that we received. The legislative strategy part was inspired again by those states who have had success in being reclassified statewide or locally. This is something that people can work on in the meantime, develop relationships. We've really seen that one of the keys to this is people coming together and putting a plan forward. So part 4 tries to help people understand what it takes to develop a legislative strategy, what the steps are, and how to do them. I'm really impressed with how this document breaks down the different steps, because it seems very daunting. How do we change legislation in our state? Like, I don't even know where to start, right? So it breaks everything down into small, manageable steps, and also points out some of those things that you might have trouble with, like, how do I find the legislation? Like, how do I know what is in legislation in my state? Where can I find that? What is a lobbyist? How can a lobbyist help me? What's a good lobbyist do? What does that look like? How do I procure one? So the appendix in this document is fantastic because it has sample letters to legislators. It has sample legislation. It has media. If you're involving the media, how do you do that? How do you utilize social media? How do you build this case in your state to help reclassification move forward in that way?
Excellent. Now, I put the link out there for everything that we've been talking about here. But I want to ask, because like I said, a lot of times people don't ask questions because they don't know what to ask. Or some of them might have a little bit of a fear to go forward with a lot of different things at their center. And there's always one, right? There's always one that is kind of like that disruptor in a way. The way things, it's always been done this way, but someone comes in and yes, and disrupts that. They break the cycle, and they push things forward the best that they can. So and again, before we get to the links here for the in-depth sessions that you all are going to be doing, what is some advice that you can give? And this is for any one of you, or each one of you can take a crack at it as well. What is any advice that you can give for those in their centers who want to continue to move forward, who want to make some of these changes, whether it be, changing those job descriptions, or, trying to figure out training or anything like that, that they will be able to utilize and, put together with this whole reclassification toolkit, just to get them out of their, out of their nerves to move forward with this.
So generally, our hope and our goal with this session and with the ones coming up here in February is to get these tools into the hands of the right people who can be that disruptor. I think what we've learned here, and the advice that I can give, is you will be told no. Working with the National 911 program has taught me so much of like, okay, well, we can't tell people they have to have national training standards, so we're going to do this best practices document and people can use it if they want. Like, there's always, we were told no by the BLS, so we're going to develop and we're going to get better, we're going to get stronger. I would take kind of that inspiration and try to push it forward with you all in this. It's not going to be easy, but you're doing the right thing. You have the tools now. Keep asking people, keep pushing. If someone tells you no, talk to somebody else. It's a lot easier today with social media and outreach and LinkedIn to find the right people to help you. So I would just say, don't let no stop you.
My thoughts are kind of twofold. I remember when I was a young, new employee dispatcher in 911, I was going to change the world, and I was very caught up in emotional pleas, and now after sitting in the director's shoes, learning that was falling on deaf ears. It wasn't the right approach. I think it's in your piece, Sarah, in the legislative strategy too. Emotion's fine, but you have to taper it with data and facts, and you actually have to understand how things work in your county, in your locality. So definitely, even with the BLS thing, I said I wish I knew how it worked back in 2016. So I think if you're going to push change, that you need to do the research so you understand how your HR practices work, so you understand how your training program works, those kind of things first, before you have this big emotional plea, and have the data and facts to kind of support you. Right. I learned that the hard way, and I just don't want anyone to go through what I did, because I was just the loudmouth in the 911 center and got overlooked because of it. It wasn't because I wasn't trying to do good things, but I just went about it the wrong way.
I think Nikki nailed it on the head. I think from my standpoint, I remember back in, when I was dispatching Jesus.
Wait, you were dispatching Jesus, or you were dispatching Jesus?
I was. Either one, it doesn't matter.
So Ty's now, you're more than 1,000 years old now.
He keeps getting older and older as we go.
Older and older and older. But the reality of, I was kind of like Nikki described. I was the one that was going to go change the world. And in a lot of ways, I did. But I think that the one thing that somebody told me early on was, okay, if you're going to do this, you got to have that data. And so, yeah, as Natalie says, it's intelligence and passion at the same time. Yeah. So being able to bring that data and information with the story, those two things coupled are more powerful than each of them independently. So, again, we just had this hearing last week about training here in Indiana, and one of John Jocantis, one of the directors that got up and talked about it, he's talking about the data side of it, but coupled it right with, talking about people on their worst day and taking those last calls and those types of things. When you put all of that stuff together, then it tells a story that's much beyond what each of those individual pieces can do. And I think that is the key to it. And then I'm just going to end with kind of what Sarah said, and that is, don't give up. Keep at it, right? I mean, you might get initial no, but don't be defeated in that initial no. Just take that initial no and say, okay, what do I need to do to readjust my efforts to make a better argument the next time? But the reality is, our industry has been growing and getting better. And it's because of the people that have been working and not giving up and saying, this is an important thing, and we're going to do it right.
Man, I don't even know. I know. Yeah, take this off.
Drop that mic.
Very well said. This has been awesome to have all of you on here to do a high level overview for this round of the Dispatchers Roundtable on the reclassification toolkit. Now, you have all of these sessions that are going to be coming up. I think there's 3 or so of them that are going to be coming up. So, Sarah, I want to go to you for this. I've got links that I'm going to be sharing here in the comments, and I'm going to go ahead and share this first one here that's on February 7th.
Yes, so February 7th, we are going to do kind of a more in-depth overview of all of them. We're going to be talking in more detail about all the things that we talked about today. So the first one in the series is going to cover everything. And then the second one is February 22nd at noon, and we're going to cover the first 2. So we're going to really dive in depth on the job descriptions and updating training. So we'll be going through the documents actually and showing you what they consist of, what they say, and answering any questions that you may have on how to apply them. And then the final one is February 25th at 10, and all of these times are in Eastern because that's where I am. The final one is going to be the last 2. So we'll talk about technology, SOPs, and we'll talk about the legislative document. Again, more in depth. We'll go through the document. So I really recommend, if you're interested and you want to join, you can sign up now. And downloading these documents in advance and reading through them before you join, so you can come with your questions, and it'll just make it a little more useful for you.
Excellent. I will make sure to share all of this stuff as well on the podcast page and throughout social media, with everything that I'm doing as well, to get more people to go in there and just learn so much more about this this in-depth conversation on the reclassification toolkit. Thank you all once again. I put the website out there for the toolkit and all, but everything is found on 911.gov, right?
Yes, 911.gov. If you don't know what it is, please go visit it. It's actually it's going to be changing a little bit soon because it has to cover, general public stuff and, what we're talking about. But it has so many tools. So go in there, check it out, get familiar. But yes, that's where it all lives.
Awesome. Well, thank you, all of you, so much for being on this, and for everyone who has joined us here live and as well during the replay, and to all the patrons who are going to be getting an audio version of this as well. I am going to drop your windows down here and do my outro and everything. But again, thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions or anything, actually, yeah, if they have any questions and want to reach out to all of you, how do they get a hold of you guys?
I didn't really talk about that.
Look us up on LinkedIn. That'll work. Look them up on LinkedIn and send a message. How about that?
That works. I'm on LinkedIn.
Yes. Yeah. Look us up.
Call Sarah. She's my agent.
Do not call me if you want your phone call answered.
Oh, hold on. Let me put her phone number on the screen. I'm playing.
Change my number. No, just kidding. You can. I'm sorry, Nikki, what is the email address for NHTSA? I don't want to mess it up.
I'm going to mess it up too. So you're asking
okay.
Don't ask me either, because I don't
go to Sarah on Facebook.
You can. We're all on LinkedIn, and I guess as you see us post about this, you can send a Facebook message or whatever's most convenient for you.
Awesome. Excellent.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, you are welcome. And I will be right back here with each and every one of you. For those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. And also, when emailing in, if you have any topic ideas for the Dispatchers Roundtable, please send something out. Again, it is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn Live, which it looks like is not checked on here for some reason. It wasn't on there, but it will be exported and added to it. So make sure to look out for that on LinkedIn Live as well. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine. Special thanks to patrons. If you want to be a patron and support us, you can hook us up, patreon.com/WTT podcast. And then for patrons only, you get an audio version of this. And then for the flagship show Within the Trenches podcast, you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you in the next one.